Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started here in just a moment. But for those who have just joined, I wanted to invite you, number one, thank you for joining us today, but then to invite you to drop in the chat where you're from and a one-word reaction to artificial intelligence, especially as you're hearing about it most recently. Just one word, drop it in the chat, what your reaction is. My name's Tim Leibarger. I'm the founder and executive director of Encore NEO, and I sit on the program committee of the Encore Network. The Encore Network is a coalition of leaders who champion the civic, social, and economic contributions of people age 50 and older by creating community, stimulating learning, and inspiring action to transform the Encore stage of life. We're excited to bring you this webinar today. In addition to myself, today's program is the result of the collaboration between Doug Dixon of the Encore Boston Network, Kathy Hallisey of the Cleveland Foundation, and Kelly Enright of the Encore Network. I want to thank you all for the efforts to bring this program to us today. Our topic today relates to the latest of what artificial intelligence means for our work, our lives, and for older adults. The agenda today will be fairly fast-paced. First, we'll hear from Polly Allen, whom I'll introduce in just a moment, as she sets the stage for our reflections on artificial intelligence. Next, we'll go into breakout groups where collectively, you'll get an opportunity to share some of your looming questions and ideas about what would give you personally more confidence in learning to live with artificial intelligence. Then in the final segment, we'll invite you to share your group thoughts in the chat function for Polly's responses and some additional insights and questions as time allows. Logistically, we want to keep a few things in mind. First off, please mute yourself during the webinar so background noise doesn't interfere with the ability of everyone to hear and participate without distraction. Throughout the session, you can use the chat function at the bottom of your screen to submit thoughts and questions, and we encourage you to do that during the presentation. This event is being recorded, and we'll send an email to all who registered for the event in just a few days with a link to the recording and any additional resources, including the chat. Now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our presenter for today's webinar, Polly Allen. Polly is a seasoned professional in the field of artificial intelligence with over 20 years of experience in software development and team leadership. In her most recent corporate role as principal product manager for Alexa AI at Amazon, she led generative artificial intelligence projects using similar underlying technology to ChatGPT. Polly is passionate about empowering more people to participate in the field of AI, and to this end, she founded the world's first AI-focused career accelerator, AI Career Boost, with educational programs for novices and experts alike. She holds a master's degree in computer sciences from MIT and the University of Victoria, as well as an MBA from the University of British Columbia. And without further hesitation, Polly, I'm going to hand it over to you so you can guide us into this exciting field of artificial intelligence.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that warm introduction, Tim. So as Tim mentioned, this is my polybot picture of myself as a cyborg, if you will. Welcome all to today's presentation. My goal today really is to demystify some of what's going on in artificial intelligence, and particularly with ChatGPT today, and provide a glimpse into how it's changing the future of work and our society. I'm really happy to see so many positive, warm feelings towards artificial intelligence in the chat. I'm glad folks are more excited than scared from what it sounds like, which is a great place to start. So today, what I wanted to cover was a quick introduction to artificial intelligence and ChatGPT, what it is. We're going to talk about who is really threatened and at risk with some of these technologies that are emerging so quickly right now, and what are some of the opportunities in front of us, particularly as it relates to supporting older adults and folks reentering the workforce. So as a quick introduction, I wanted to bust some myths that are out there and very pervasive in the media today. So the first one is that artificial intelligence really has one good definition. As an expert in the space, I've grown to hate this question more than any others. People ask, is this an artificial intelligence, or what is artificial intelligence? It's a term that's been overused now so much that it's become practically meaningless, and it really is a marketing term above all else. But and I also find the definition shifts depending on who you're talking to. The dictionary definition, they all trend towards things that computers can do that we previously thought only humans can do. Well, if you go back 20 years, you couldn't do your taxes or book a hotel. So people tend to use artificial intelligence to mean anything that can be automated, which doesn't really explain why everyone's so excited about it right now. The current craze in artificial intelligence that has driven so much excitement is about a specific subfield of artificial intelligence called machine learning. And for those of you who aren't familiar with kind of how supervised machine learning works, it's using patterns in data for the systems to make decisions for themselves based on those patterns. I like to explain it as, instead of providing instructions to computers in the forms of code, this is a new way to communicate with computers, where instead of instructions, we give them a set of examples of here's what I want you to learn, and it will infer those rules. And this has been powerful enough to really help us address some problems that previously the rules were too complex and too complicated for us to be automating those cases. The example I like to use is how we teach children colors. When we're first teaching young children about colors, we don't say to them, oh, if you want to know if something's green, just check if it's halfway between yellow and blue, right? Instead, we show them examples and point at things and say yellow, blue, green, and children will point at things and confirm their hypothesis. Is this blue? Yes, that's right, that's blue. In that same way that our brains are kind of inferring the rules of what does blue mean? What does green mean? This is very similar to how the computers are now inferring the rules from a set of data or a set of examples that we're giving them. And that this has been so powerful as the data sets get larger and larger, and the CPUs or brains are getting more and more powerful, is the part that's been driving so much excitement these days. So artificial intelligence in general means people are talking about the specific sub-branch of machine learning in the media today. The other myth I wanted to make sure we aren't falling prey to is this idea that machine learning, that ChatGPT is the only form of it, that it's the best form. It is the one garnering a lot of attention right now, but this field of generative text AI, we'll go into what that means in a second, where we're generating text output, is one subfield of generative AI. There are other models that can generate images or video or music. Even generative AI is just one subfield of machine learning as well. Machine learning has been all around us for decades. Every time you are watching Netflix and you get recommended a movie, that's a form of machine learning that has been, deciding which movie you are most likely to want to watch and like. So it's not something to be afraid of. It's because it's been with us for such a long time. We're used to it in a lot of contexts. So what is ChatGPT? You've probably heard about it in the headlines. It was first launched in November by a company called OpenAI, and it's the first software application to reach 1 million users in 5 days. It's absolutely staggering how quickly this has caught on in popular culture. It has over 100 million users worldwide right now. And it's a machine learning model that humans can chat with in natural language. And one of the interesting and revolutionary things that OpenAI did was they put this model out on the web on a website, and they provided access to it for free. So it was free and very easy for people to interact with this model. Whereas before that, it had required people to know how to program to really get a sense of the things those models could do. So this model is a language model, and it was shown examples of text. When I say a lot of examples, I mean like all of Wikipedia is less than a tenth of all of the text that it was trained on. It was trained on large swaths of the internet, on Reddit conversations and things like that. So it was given examples of how humans communicate, both in writing and when they're talking back and forth. So from there, what this model is really doing is just guessing, given all the data that it's seen and the feedback that it's gotten, given your prompt or question, what is the next best word that is most likely to satisfy your request? It's often best to understand what ChatGPT is doing by actually looking at it at the site itself. So you can go to OpenAI's ChatGPT website, and this is what you'll see. You may have to log in to get access, and just so you're aware, there are times when the website is down because it's been so popular. You can pay $20 a month to get access to their professional version, which is never down, not down, and always available. But they give some good examples. You see at the bottom where you can actually type in, that's the box where you can type in the prompt or what you want, your conversation or your instruction to be to the model. And they have examples like explain a concept, give me creative ideas, even can you write me some code? These are all things that it gives excellent answers for. It's interesting in its capabilities because it can remember what you've said earlier in the conversation. So many chatbots previous to this were kind of a little bit dumb in terms of being able to remember things you said 3 turns ago and not very human-like. So this way you can actually correct it if the answer you get isn't quite what you're looking for. And they did a lot of work to train ChatGPT to decline inappropriate and unsafe requests. So if you ask it for something illegal or immoral, how to build a bomb, for example, it will tell you, I'm sorry, I've been trained not to answer those kinds of questions. It's important to recognize the limitations here, and I think these often get ignored in media to our detriment. So they are clear here. It may occasionally generate incorrect information. We'll dive a little deeper into that. And it may occasionally also produce harmful instructions or biased content. So many folks have shown that it's very easy to override the safeguards that they've put in place to make sure that people don't ask it to write code to hack into other people's systems or teach you how to build a bomb. It's very easy just using English language to give it instructions that to ignore all of its safeguards and get some of this dangerous suggestions or information. It's also frozen in time, meaning that it has limited knowledge after 2021. So any of the information you get from it will be, by definition, a little bit out of date. So I wanted to cover some of the things people are doing with ChatGPT. And at the end, I'll give you a link you can go to where you can see thousands and thousands of examples of prompts that people are using. But there's some main ways that people are using this technology. So one is research. You may have seen in the media that Microsoft has invested a lot in OpenAI, the company that makes ChatGPT, so that they can integrate it into their web search engine, Bing. So Bing is a competitor to Google search. And the idea here is that instead of your traditional Google search, where you go in and Google something and get a bunch of links, and then have to go and kind of click into each link and kind of do an analysis and synthesis of all that information yourself, ChatGPT can do that for you. It can look over a bunch of websites and present a nice summary that is easier for you to digest and get information much more quickly. So this has been a lot of hubbub in the tech world over the idea that this may be the new way that we're going to do search. This is going to displace Google. And perhaps Bing has a chance to actually become a much more popular option than it has been in the past. Another thing people are using it for, just like we saw on the previous screen, is to ideate, give me ideas for a 10-year-old girl's birthday party or gifts. There's a lot of people using this in marketing, saying, give me 10 ideas for a blog post in my niche, a social media hook. Because it's been trained on so much text, it knows what a social media hook looks like in general, and is quite good at coming up with sort of formulaic things like that, that can be then applied to, your particular industry, for example. One of the main use cases, of course, is writing, and it can write both text in any language or code as well, to varying degrees of success. In both cases, there's issues with it either being correct code or even correct language, but people are using it as a lot of first passes for everything from emails and strategy documents in their work to poems for their loved ones, recipes. And this is an area where basically anything you could ask an assistant or another person to write for you, you can give it a try, see if it can write it for you. Like I said, you could ask it to write an email in a foreign language, or you could ask it to give you a Java or C++ code for a particular application. And then rewriting is a similar but different use case. So here you would give it instructions as well as some input. And I use this frequently. It's one of my favorite use cases. If you wanted to summarize some content, you don't want to read all of it. You want to simplify some writing, or say, take my writing and rewrite this at a grade 6 reading level, grade 8 reading level. Rewriting can also include translation, like we talked about, but it can also include rewriting for tone. So you could say, please rewrite this in the style of Shakespeare, in the style of Hamilton lyrics. The limits really are your creativity here. And then finally, the last big one that has caused, I think, a lot of folks to really rethink how this applies in their jobs is this idea of asking ChatGPT to act as a particular an expert in an area. So you can say something like, can you act as a psychologist familiar with the following methods? Now I'm going to have a conversation with you and provide answers as if you were that expert. So this is the area that we're seeing a lot of folks saying, like, is this going to replace psychologists, doctors, teachers? Because you can instead of consulting a human expert, you can now consult ChatGPT. So when you see the capabilities, it's really quite impressive, and especially when you first start playing around with it, I encourage you to try it, to definitely spend some time trying it out. It's one of those things where as you play with it more and more, you get more familiar with the limitations and how these definitely are very far away from acting as a real expert in most domains. The biggest issue that I think is going to keep this from being particularly useful in a lot of business use cases or automating a lot of jobs the whole way is some issues of factual inaccuracy. You may have seen headlines that ChatGPT can pass the bar exam, can pass medical exams, etc. But what doesn't get a lot of attention is that it's actually incredibly easy to trick it. It's not very good at anything to do with logic. So there is no real logic or understanding in this model. It really is just looking at patterns in words that it's seen in previous discussion and guessing the next best word. So for example, just last night, I asked it who is taller, Joe Biden or Donald Trump. And even though it clearly states Joe Biden is 6 feet tall, while Donald Trump is 6'3", it proudly declares that Joe Biden is taller. In case you think I'm cooking up this example, it's very easy to find your own. It won't always answer that incorrectly, but it may have some ideas like the fact that Tiger Woods and Kobe Bryant come from different sports and therefore cannot be compared in terms of height. So as you see, it lacks common sense, right? It lacks an understanding of what the notion of taller really means, even though it is able to put these words together in a very convincing way. I'm going to skip over that piece just for the sake of time. The next piece I'd love to talk about really is who is at risk. So the biggest risk I see, and this is a particular danger for older adults, really is the risk of fraud and misinformation. We know that there's a lot of fraud aimed at older adults as it is already, but there's already been a huge rise in job-related fraud, where people are putting up fake job postings, and they're then telling folks they're hired, going through a mock interview process, and then saying, oh, your first day on the job is this week, please give us your personal information or some money in order to complete, your onboarding, et cetera. It just got 100 times easier for fraudsters to write realistic looking job postings for a company. They can even say, look at existing job postings for this company and write me one in the same style. Right? They do not have to have strong language skills. They can write very convincing looking postings that are consistent with a company's brand and identity. So this is something that I do think we need to be warning folks about, that they're aware that this is on the rise, and it's much easier to do than it was before. Another example has been the idea of generating something that mimics human voice. It's another form of AI that has recently come to the fore. Microsoft just in January released a new tool where, if with just a snippet of audio of your voice, they can mimic your voice saying anything that you want, that the person wants. And then people can then use this in combination with ChatGPT to automate at scale frauds where if they have examples of people's voices, they can now call their loved ones, mimic an emergency, asking them to send them money. If you have a CEO, they could mimic them calling an employee and telling them to transfer money from one bank to another. We have come to trust some things in our society, like voice, as the truth. And this is an area where it's becoming more and more realistic in these deep fake areas, that we're going to have to be a lot more suspicious of the things we see and hear. The other area that's really people feel is a threat is that the job market is changing, and people are very concerned about which job categories are going to be automated away. This book from 2018, I highly recommend. It's by Kai-Fu Lee, who is the head of Google China. It gives a really great and understandable overview of what machine learning can and can't do, how it works, but it also gives you a great overview of kind of the dynamics that are happening internationally between the US and China, kind of the main AI superpowers of today. So it was written in 2018. He gives a really great framework for understanding which jobs are most at risk of automation. So he talks about jobs on two kind of spectrums. So one is this spectrum from, is the job very optimization based, where your goal is to be correct and quick at some repeatable job, right? Or is the job more strategy or creativity based? So that's sort of one axis that we've got on the horizontal axis. And then the other axis is really how social that job is. So does this job depend on your relationship with someone? So the less social and the less creative a job is, the more at risk it is for automation. So some examples in that danger zone that are off to the bottom left. If you are a telemarketer or a customer service rep who is following a script or a decision tree, so your job is quite automatable, and you don't necessarily have a deep relationship with the person on the phone. They're not asking for a particular customer service rep, for example, right? Those jobs are definitely in that danger zone, and we're seeing are already being automated in 2023. These ones with a human veneer are interesting because these are ones where you're still looking for optimization, but there's definitely a human veneer and more of a relationship. I love the example of, say, like a wedding coordinator who maybe is operating by a set of checklists and things that are very similar for each wedding. But in general, you have a personal relationship with your wedding coordinator, and you don't necessarily even want this to be automated, right? Other examples include like teachers or general practitioners, right, who are like doctor GPs, who aren't necessarily like using creativity or strategy to diagnose a particular patient. A lot of them are using what could be considered, a fairly broad set of rules to either decide, here's how I'm going to arrange my outline about a known topic, or here's people come into my office, they have a cough or a cold, they do need antibiotics or they don't, right? Again, I think the human veneer part is also that we really, especially for high risk areas like medicine, we want a human to be accountable for the decision that they're making and the recommendations that they're giving. So these jobs traditionally have a little more protection against automation. What's interesting is that with COVID in 2020, we're so much more used to operating with people online, maybe just chatting text back and forth. And this is where we're seeing ChatGPT is being more disruptive than maybe it would be anticipated to some of those fields. Specifically, teaching is one of the ones that has been seeing as a lot of disruption. So some of the slow creep areas are areas like graphic designers, newspaper columnists. These require creativity. Again, ChatGPT is showing evidence of being much more human-like and much more creative than previously thought possible. So both of these zones, both the slow creep and the human veneer, are a little more at risk than previously thought. And then finally, the safe zone is areas where you find the most creativity and relationships. One example I'd seen was a criminal defense attorney, but even things like your hairstylist or your physical therapist, right, where the relationship is in person because it relates so well to the physical world. Specialist doctors who are using creativity or strategy to come up with individualized diagnoses for things that are, require higher skill. These are areas that are definitely in the safer zone. So some of the opportunities I wanted to go over. The interesting thing, to be clear, I am continue to be a bit of a skeptic about ChatGPT because of this issue in particular around factuality, as well as bias, as well as the ethical concerns that people have around the use of these systems. But we are seeing the early studies; these literally were coming out in the last month. We're showing that computer programmers have a 55% increase in productivity when using AI. And professionals writing realistic memos, strategy documents, policies, 37% faster. So to contextualize this, adding steam power in the 19th century for a small plant was only increasing productivity by 25%. So there are definitely areas where this is increasing productivity. It's clear there's going to be these massive productivity gains for those who are using AI in sort of the least creative and least social elements of their job. But there is broad consensus that these won't be necessarily automating away, especially knowledge-based work, because they do need oversight, because they do need people to check them. It's just that most jobs are going to be changing, and especially as people adopt these technologies more and more. So the good news is that the basics of ML and how to use it are accessible. ChatGPT is free, and I do encourage you to check out prompts.chat. It's a website where they have the basics of how to write prompts for ChatGPT, as well as thousands of examples of how it can be used. It's a great resource. Again, I invite you to keep your skeptic hat on when you see any of the output, and think about how this might not necessarily align either with something you'd put your name on if you're going to use this to send information out, or how factually correct it really is. It's very difficult to check oftentimes. If you're ready to go beyond just learning how to use ChatGPT, I do have some free resources available, sort of a resource learning sheet of best places online to learn about AI and machine learning that are not for programmers. So this is just for the layperson. And we've got a list of videos to watch, free courses on Coursera that we'd love for you to take a look at. If you're interested in even more, do sign up for our newsletter at aicareerboost.com. We are offering courses, including we have an upcoming course for software professionals or folks interested in designing and building conversational AI products that use technology like ChatGPT. There's no programming required for this course. And we're getting rave reviews from our existing students that it really taught them the basics of how to use this technology within their own products. So startup founders, product managers looking to apply this, UX designers as well, learning how to design for these systems. If you yourself or you have anyone in your network who may be interested in staying ahead of the curve, I invite you to check this out. So just a few quick takeaways before we head into some breakouts. This tweet is from last night. It's not from 14 hours ago anymore, but Sam Altman is the CEO of ChatGPT, or OpenAI, the maker of ChatGPT. They have just released GPT-4 within the last few days. And he does warn us at the bottom, it is still flawed. It is still limited, and it still seems more impressive on first use than it does after you spend more time with it. So I encourage you to definitely keep in mind that even the CEO of OpenAI is very open about the limitations of this technology, and that we're not clear that these problems are going to be solved using the current methods or anytime soon. So we are a long way before these systems are going to replace human judgment, but they are already changing how we work. So I do encourage you to try them out yourselves or encourage others in your network to at least play around with them and get familiar. Understanding about AI helps everyone to be more aware of the risks. And I do think it's a field that really needs the wisdom of older workers in the field. You know, the currency is no longer information or knowledge. Now that knowledge is so accessible online, it really is that willingness and ability to learn. So that oversight of these systems and the wisdom is going to be key in learning how to navigate this new world where so many things are changing so quickly. Excellent. So with that, I think we'll move on to some breakout sessions.
Yeah, good. Polly, thank you so much for this, really kind of broad brush introduction to artificial intelligence, and especially through ChatGPT here. I'm left with this feeling that this is not only coming, it's coming very rapidly, and it's going to expand very rapidly given the market value that's there and the competition between the big players who are trying to gain market share around this. So the question is, how do we keep up with this? And as we go into breakout groups, I'd like you to discuss amongst yourselves, what would personally give you more confidence in learning to live with artificial intelligence? What is it that you would really wish to have individually to keep up with this? And any looming questions that you have in addition to that, especially how it might impact your career. So just to get the conversation going, and Kelly, I think you're going to break us into groups here. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm going to open them now.
All right, so we'll take
8 minutes.
8 minutes to do that. So a quick conversation, then we'll come back. At the end of the breakout groups, I'm going to invite you to put your questions and comments into chat, and we'll take them out of that because we don't have time for a report out from each individual group. So please begin to record those, at least in your mind or on paper, so that you can put them in chat when we come back together. Okay? What I do is welcome everybody back. And I encourage you to put into the chat function some of the threads of the conversations that you had in your breakout groups. And Doug Dixon and I are going to go through it, observe these, and Polly, you can keep an eye on it as well and pick up some of the things to respond to in the wee bit of time that we have left here for the rest of the hour.
100%. Great. So I'm getting some great questions in here. One question was, if ChatGPT would help us taking meeting minutes? 100%. So Microsoft, you can use ChatGPT if you're able to record your meeting minutes and transfer them to text There's some great software out there. I use otter.ai as that's the voice to text software. But with Microsoft investing so much in ChatGPT and OpenAI, you're going to see tools popping up right within, say, your Teams meeting. So it will happen that Zoom will have a feature, for example, that says, should I take meeting minutes? And not only will it be able to take the minutes, you can even say afterwards, hey, can you extract the action items? Or ask it questions like, did we decide to do X or Y during the meeting? As opposed to having to scan for it yourself. So these are some of the tools coming. You won't necessarily have to use ChatGPT. That kind of ability is going to be in more and more of the tools that you already use.
One of the questions that came up earlier before we went into breakout groups, Gordon asked about what controls there are related to the ethical or unethical use of artificial intelligence. What are they doing to address that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And this is a big kettle of fish.
Yeah.
So in general, the release of these models has been seen as quite risky by some, because basically the companies are saying, hey, we're warning you. You saw right on the ChatGPT interface, we told you that this can be misused, that this can be used for malicious purposes, that it can have biased output, harmful outputs. We've warned you, so anything that you do with it, that is on you. So it's about the accountability for using it. There are laws and protections right now for software companies, basically to use this line to say, hey, like for example, Facebook, we're a platform. Whatever users do on our platform, they're bad actors, not us. And so we can't be sued for anything that, massively affects elections or things like that, right? These are definitely regulations that are being revisited in the light of, was it responsible to release things that could, for example, make it so easy for students to easily write all of their essays for school without the teachers being able to tell if this is really them or AI that's doing it, or even that this could be used to write code that could hack into other people's systems by people who don't necessarily know how. So the ethical considerations are definitely an ongoing and big debate. And I think there's a lot of justified concern that the legal frameworks we have can't and don't move fast enough compared to the technology and the abilities that it's unlocking. So it'll be interesting to see if we're able to kind of hold these systems accountable for what people are doing with them, or if we're going to try and, one by one, anyone who misuses this stuff for nefarious purposes, really put those people on the hot seat. It's
So
definitely. Please go ahead.
So the technology will move very quickly, and the unethical uses, some of the examples that you gave there, are going to crop up very quickly. But the latest system is slow in response to that kind of same thing. So we're liable to see a lot of things in the news about how it's being misused in some way. That gap is going to exist for a while.
Exactly. There are definite efforts on the parts of the companies that make these models. Anthropic, for example, has a new form of this model called constitutional AI, where they train it by actually having a model that specially detects misuse and any of these ethical violations, and then rewrites the answer. And then it's trained to say, do not answer these kinds of questions, do not provide the kinds of following information. We're yet to see if that's going to, be a panacea and actually help us out 100%, if it helps us out 20%. It's definitely an emerging and rapid field where they're trying to make sure they can mitigate.
Gotcha. Probably one of the comments that came up in our group, it seems promising for organizing and synthesizing information, but risky around the human element where empathy is needed or where people could be fooled. I know where I've heard about businesses using it, it saves so much time in writing communications to customers around things, but what it lacks then is the empathetic involvement with customers. So we ask ChatGPT, what the right thing is to say. It composes it, but we lack that human connection. Any reaction to that?
Yeah, I think of it as if like you have always been able to like outsource buying a birthday gift for your children or for your mom to someone else, but if they knew you'd done it, wouldn't they be hurt? Right. And so I think of ChatGPT using it that way too, is like, would you still be using this with that client if they knew you had automated this message and then therefore felt less of a personal connection? So I think there is this element of we can scale this, but we can only scale our own personal relationships so far. You can give the appearance of personal connection, but it is something I think we'll have to be careful, or it becomes inauthentic really quickly.
Good. What else? Doug, you pick up anything here?
Yeah, one of the things that came up in our group, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about it, is the judgment factor in terms of assessing whether what you're seeing is in fact factual. And the thought that people with more experience, more life experience, in particular expertise around a certain topic, are in a position to make that judgment more so than people with less experience. And that does correlate to some degree, at least on some topics, with age. And that kind of speaks to the value of age in a way, right? In being able to make those judgments, but also the value of intergenerational work teams where you can connect, judgments across a spectrum of experience in validating tools like ChatGPT and their output.
Yes, 100%. I think it's important to remember the one source of large amounts of text data that's been able to enable this has been the internet, which has only been around since the 1990s, right? So that it is heavily biased in information that is present since then. And it doesn't have the context, it doesn't have that we have in real world that a lot of human experts have. The very best models that we have today, there's a benchmark set of questions that scientists have devised, which are questions where human experts generally get them right, but if you're not an expert, you're typically misinformed, right? So these are questions where the average person doesn't know the answer, but an expert would. And on those questions, the human experts, if you get them in each area, score around 94%. These models, the very best of them that they can do is 58% correct, right? So it's those areas of deeper expertise where the technologists hope that they're like, we'll just keep training them on more and more data and give them deeper knowledge in each of these areas. It's not proven that will really work. And then the importance of having both the context, the historical context, and just the wisdom to be able to correct these systems. I think that means that for a long time, they will be an aid and assistive rather than something that replaces people. And that value of more experienced workers having that context is really key, and I think really speaks to the value they can add here.
Thank you. One of the threads here is showing up is artificial intelligence. Is there an artificial intelligence that can detect the use of artificial intelligence? So,
Right.
So that we're not fooled, or there's some way to detect that.
Exactly. And I've heard this with ChatGPT. They talk about having a watermark or something that if you copy and paste the text from ChatGPT to something else, you can tell. There are tools out there. OpenAI has its own detect GPT tools, but they are not 100%. And the issue has been that it's kind of like a cat and mouse game, where as soon as they create these watermarks or detector tools, that someone goes, okay, well, I just rearranged 4 words and now you can't tell, now it can't detect it anymore. And so then they have to go back and improve the models based on how people are getting around them. It's going to, for a long time, kind of be like it is in security, where there's kind of like 2 teams, one team trying to enforce this detectability, and then people in the wild who are trying to get around it. And it'll be almost like your antivirus software that needs continuous updates. But there are going to be more and more tools that help you understand if this was made by AI.
So one of the things I think you may actually, or I don't know where I heard it, but as artificial intelligence can create its own video and apply somebody else's voice, it's not a big stretch to imagine prominent politicians around the world being constructed to say certain things that are very destructive in a sense. So how do we eventually discern? How can we discern? Or is it the same answer, essentially, that there's systems being developed to monitor that, but it's the cat and mouse thing of trying to keep up with it?
Exactly. And I think it is kind of the cat and mouse thing to keep up with it. I do think that we have been in this information age where we trust things that we see online.
Mm.
It's going to be new age where what we value is truth, and that who we are getting the information from will matter even more than it has before, right? So if you trust a particular news agency, for example, to not include deep fakes of politicians and fall for that information, you are asking them to be the arbiters of what is true and what is fake in the information you see online. We're going to see a rise in that the trustfulness of people and brands is going to be much more important.
Interesting spin. So a media channel, its value proposition to the marketplace is that it vets this stuff out truly before using it in some way, which builds trust. Okay. Mark, you've got your hand up. You have a question?
Yeah, I wanted to get Polly's take on this. I've been using it for a lot of ideation, but I've also been using it for rewriting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll feed in the my podcast titles and say rewrite it, and by the way, improve the click-through rate.
Right.
And then you can ask it and say, oh, why is this better for a click-through rate? And it'll explain it. I also had here recently where I had a problem with my tubeless tire on my bicycle. I put a plug in it and it wasn't sealing. And so I asked it, I said, okay, here's all of the problems I'm having. What should I do? And it came out with a detailed problem determination.
Yeah.
And I think it was Jane or somebody else asked me, well, couldn't you just gotten on YouTube? And the answer is, yeah, but it would take me hours
to find exactly what you're looking for.
So what I've found is, that's why I'm real interested in that prompts. It's learning how to talk to it to get what you want.
Exactly. And that is sort of an emerging area that people are exploring en masse. Prompts.chat is a great resource for exactly that. I will say, keep in mind your example of the click-through rate. I'm sure it came up with a very believable, good answer about why its improved ones were better. No one has actually done the test.
Correct.
Their own, and then using these and proven that they do have better click-through rates. So each of these different ways that people are using them and saying, oh, this is better, they're not actually getting quantitative data and knowing that it's better or not, right? So that can be, just take it with a grain of salt. But I agree, prompts.chat has been my go-to resource for finding different ways to get more effective in using it and how to speak with it.
Yeah, I was on a search engine optimization webinar last week. And one of the things they talked about, you could ask, say, well, what's the best from a keyword perspective? And it would come up with, and they
exactly right.
Explain that it has no access to keyword research.
Exactly.
So basically, the answer it came back was bullshit.
Yeah.
Excuse my friend.
Exactly. And it's all from 2021.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. But it sounds very plausible. The answers look right. So
yes.
It's very difficult to detect a lot of the time, unless you have you have to really keep on top of it. Great point.
Good. Thanks very much, Mark. So we're at the end of our time here. It's going very quickly today. It's such an engaging topic. And Polly, I really want to thank you for leading us into this enlightening discussion and making me more curious. Thanks for sharing the resources as well. That's going to be one of the challenges, is how do we really figure this stuff out as it develops. Kelly, you put up the poll. I think people saw the response to the poll. Looks like folks learned quite a bit from today. So again, Polly, we thank you. As noted earlier, those who registered for this, the session has been recorded. We will send you a link in a few days so you can refer to it, share it, listen to it again, whatever you like. We'll also include links to the resources mentioned here as well. At this point, I think unless anybody has any other comments, Doug, did you have anything else? Or we'll go ahead and sign off. Please. Is that enough?
I was going to say, thanks, Polly, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you all, everyone. It's been great.
Thank you.
That
All
was
right.
helpful.